I'm Kim Stacy. Today is Friday, July the 8th, and I'm interviewing Lois Vincek and Patsy Sabrsula.
Right.
So ladies, how are y'all doing this evening?
We're
Good.
great.
Good.
Good. So tell me a little bit about yourselves.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, you're the oldest.
Well, since I'm the senior partner, I'm Patsy Sabrsula. I'm 80 years old. I was born in Fulshear, grew up in Fulshear, went to school and high school in Richmond, married and returned back to Simonton to raise my children. At present time, I've now returned to Fulshear and I'm living in Fullbrook. So it seems like returning home, but everything is oh so different.
I'm Lois Vincek. I was born and reared in Fulshear. Went to school in Rosenberg at Lamar High School. We rode on the bus all the way every day from Fulshear. I'm married, have 3 children. We have Vincek Smokehouse in East Bernard, and that's where I am.
Very good. So I understand that today you went to a special place in Fulshear. Tell me about that.
We did. We went to what you're calling the section house. Growing up, and Laura says she was 5, so I had to be 11 to 12. We grew up, we lived there for approximately 2 years. And I think we moved there from Symington. It was a rent property for my parents. And it's quite different today, somewhat different than it was then, but the stairs remain the same as we recalled going up to our bedrooms. And the one thing that's different is the fact that there was indoor plumbing and a bathroom, which we did not have when we were
didn't
growing
have
up.
that.
That's funny.
And tell her about the porch.
Yes, there was a porch across the top, which is down out there. Second story, we could walk out there. The railroad track was right by the house. The depot was right down the street. So, and there were no cars on the highway like it is now, but it was fun.
Good. Tell me about the porch. Like, how did it go across the whole front of the house?
Yes, it did.
As far
It
as I
went
remember,
across
it did,
the front of
yes.
the house, and there were no railings, no banisters or anything. And we were very brave to walk out because, needless to say, it was very rickety and not secure. But it was definitely there, and we would venture out on the porch.
Wow. And you mentioned the trains. How often did they come by?
Oh, they came by a lot. A lot. I was afraid of trains, and so they really came by a lot. Yes.
Wow.
And I remember, it seemed like there were some cars that stayed there, and some of the people that worked there lived in them, I think. Yes.
Where did y'all live before y'all came to the section house?
As I recall, my father worked for the county, and they were never privileged to owning a home, so their means of a home was always rental property. And we did live in Symington prior to moving back to Fulshear to the section house, because I recall going to school in Symington for maybe 1 year,
Okay.
in the maybe 4th grade.
Okay.
And as Lois mentioned trains, I don't know, but we did have the dinky that ran through Fulshear.
Mm-hmm.
And I must have been 12, 13 years old, and my friend and I, Mimi Dozier, whose father had Dozier's Grocery, we would ride the dinky on Saturdays, downtown Houston, get off, go shopping, have lunch, see a movie, and get back on the dinky and come home.
And what is a dinky?
The dinky was a train.
It was a train.
It ran from Houston to Eda Lake, and that was its destination.
Mm-hmm.
And it was
And it was called a dinky.
Was it like one car, or was it several cars?
Probably several cars, as I
A
remember.
few, right.
But there were real coachmen, you know, men in suits, and it was great.
Wow. That sounds like
And
a
you
fun
could ride
time.
the dinky from Fulshear to Simonton and get off and spend the day and visit friends and get back on and come back to Fulshear.
How much did it cost?
Gee, I'm going to say a quarter, you know, 10 cents or 25 cents. I don't recall exactly, but which was probably a lot at that, considering the time.
And so what are some of your best memories of living in section house, and what did y'all call it? We call it the section house or the switch house.
I don't remember
As I
what
Home.
we
recall, it was
called
probably
it.
the section
House, I think,
Okay.
Yes.
because it had something to do with the railroad.
Right.
So because the railroad was there.
It belonged to the railroad, probably. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I had a lot of great fond memories.
Okay. And so where did you attend school while you lived in the section house? You mentioned that you went to school in Rosenberg. So tell us about that. Like, what were your days like? How long was the trip? How did you get there?
Well, Lois
I wasn't in school
Lois
yet.
wasn't in school at that
yet.
time, but we attended, and I'm going to correct her because she did not attend school in Rosenberg.
Yeah, I went to Richmond my first grade.
Yeah,
Okay.
we rode the bus from Fulshear to Richmond. At that time, Fulshear was a part of Richmond High School, the Richmond School District. Simonton was a part of Rosenberg School District. And it was not until I was in the a freshman, maybe seventh grade, that Rosenberg and Richmond consolidated.
What year do you think that was, if you were in 7th grade?
Probably late 40s, late 40s.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did your father do when you lived out here? When you lived in the section
He worked
house?
for the county.
Mm-hmm.
He ran a drag line. He worked for the county as long as I can remember.
A maintenance operator.
Mhm.
What's a drag line?
It's a piece of heavy
It's a-
equipment.
Yeah, like a bulldozer. You know
Oh,
what
okay.
a bulldozer? Okay. Yes.
But didn't you build all the roads?
Yeah, he worked for
Yeah,
the
he
county.
helped, right.
Right.
They built the roads and things like that.
What were some other buildings around you that you remember? What other, like, where did you go to the store? What'd you do for fun?
Fun. Where the Shell station was the grocery store and the hardware store. It was called Briscoe, Harris, Huggins, Mason, Grady. I don't know if Grady was in there at
Grady
the time.
came in later.
Very late.
Later.
But then our mother worked there also. So, grocery store, hardware store. They bought pecans, you know.
And then there was a service station
Station.
across the street, you know, which sold gas. But next door to them there was a garage,
Called Service Garage.
which belonged to the Hellwigs.
Mm-hmm.
And what did y'all do for fun?
I don't remember what
There wasn't a lot to do in Fulshear. At one time, years ago, there was a school in Fulshear, and my older sister went to school there. But it was closed when I started school, and there was a tennis court there. We would do these crazy things like walk up to the cemetery and smoke grapevine. That's one thing we did. I mean, seriously, we did. So there wasn't a lot to do in Fulshear. And as we grew up and got to be teenagers, like 14, the biggest thing we could do was get the car on Sunday afternoon and go driving.
So y'all had a car. Your parents
Later,
Later.
much later in life, we had a car.
did. Okay. And so your sister went to school in Fulshear at a school here. What was it called? Where was it located?
It was across from the church. I don't know what's there now.
At one time, Betty and Jimmy Wade owned a home there, and the existing tennis court is still there.
We used to roller skate up there a lot.
Yeah,
The existing tennis court is still there?
I think it is. There's a cement slab there, and I feel certain that was a tennis court that was with the associated
It was across
with
from
the
the
school.
church.
In which church?
The
The Methodist
Methodist.
church?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
There were also 2 grocery stores in Fulshear.
Uh-huh.
We also
Mr.
had
Walker
Briscoe, the one that Lois mentioned, Briscoe, and then Walker's, Mr. W.J. Walker, also had a grocery store, which was down near where Dozier's is located today.
No, I think you're wrong. It was where the eating place, not Deckers, where the pepperonis and all that
Oh,
stuff
Ray's.
is.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Ray's. Yes, it was
Okay.
there. That's where Walker's was, because then
Okay.
it became Myers. Hurt Myers'
You're
dad
right.
then, yes.
So tell us how the switch house looked, or the section house looked on the inside. How do you remember it?
It looked like it did today, really. I mean, the stairs were still there.
The exception was the upgrade in the kitchen, and of course the commode in the bathroom. That was not there.
Right, we didn't have that.
Tell us like all the furniture, the color of the drapes, like paint a picture for us what it looked like.
I don't remember it all.
You know, I mean, back then we were, quote, very poor, and if we had a sofa and a chair in the living room, I'm sure drapes were secondary.
Yeah,
And as far as
I have no
paintings
idea.
and pictures on the wall, I don't remember any of that. I mean, it was just basics.
And you said the kitchen is different today. How is it different today? What changed about it over the years?
I don't remember the light fixtures. There were no cabinets that I recall. Probably a stove and a refrigerator and a table.
That was probably about all. There was a door that went out to a little screen porch or something, but that's all I remember about it.
So refresh my memory. How old were you when you lived there?
About 5.
Okay. So, what was your preference? Where did y'all go to buy groceries? You said your mom worked at Briscoe's, so she just pretty much brought things home with her.
Right, we went there
Well,
mostly.
And my mother and father always had a garden, so
Mhm.
we always had fresh vegetables.
And did y'all can and
Yes, Mother
absolutely.
always did.
okay?
Yes. And she
Always.
raised chickens and
The garden. It was behind the house. Like we'd go out the kitchen door and go out that way, and that's where the garden was back
How
there.
big was it? How many rows? Do you remember?
oh, it could have
I
been
don't
12 to
know,
15 rows.
Yeah.
Really? That's good
Everything from
size.
tomatoes,
beans,
potatoes.
squash, everything.
Yes.
Okay. And so, who were some of the other people that lived in town at that time? Do you remember? You mentioned a couple of your friends.
The Doziers lived there.
Mm-hmm.
All the Dozier family lived there.
Bentleys,
The Bentleys, of course, were there.
right, like all
And-
the Doziers.
The Walkers, W.J. Walker and his family. There was the Knotts and the Wheatings,
Mm-hmm.
and then Frank Fields lived there. L.S. Pate
But
and
at
his
the time,
family.
we didn't have a lot of kids.
No, that when
Yeah.
we were growing up, there were probably the Pate girls and Mimi and Bubba and
Right.
you and I
I know.
and Joyce.
And Joyce.
Oh, your sister Joyce.
Joyce,
Okay.
yes.
And Bubba was Bubba Dozier.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then with the Bentley family, That was Dwayne.
Mm-hmm.
Is she older or younger, same age?
She is a little younger than I am.
Okay.
And then her brother Lee John was a year older than me.
Uh-huh. And how did any of those people back then, how did they make an impression on you? What do you remember about them?
I don't know, we just saw.
What stories can you tell us?
I can tell you one about the Dozier family, and this would be the father, Mr. Ed Dozier. And it was right after the war or during the war, and when we were in a rationing period where tires were rationed and sugar was rationed, etc. And Miss Dozier, we called her Granny Dozier, and her house is still standing in Fulshear. And anyway, we were making fudge one day, and we weren't supposed to make fudge because we weren't supposed to use sugar. And we looked out and saw Granny coming home, and I mean, all the pots went under the bed. That's one thing I remember.
That's funny.
Do y'all still keep in touch with these people?
Oh yes.
Well, there's none of the Ed Dozier, Mr. Ed Dozier, who was the older Mr. Dozier. None of his family is living. The only ones that are living would be his granddaughter, Mimi, and her brother. And then she has other cousins
Right. Then
that are living.
Joe Dozier, who worked here at the post office.
Mm-hmm.
We're very good friends and talk almost every day. Bubba, see him occasionally. And Dwayne Bentley and I stay in touch.
Okay. And Ava Dozier?
Ava Lynn is Joe's sister.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
What about Jimbo?
Jimbo, right. Know all of them. Jimbo's now in College Station.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And Ava Lynn lives down 1093.
So that's like a third generation of Doziers.
Okay.
Right,
Wow.
right. Their dad was Ugg Dozier.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And Hurt Meyer comes from the Walker family.
Right.
And of course, there was the Harris family,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm sure you're familiar with.
With the
Billy
Wentz,
Wentz
Billy
and
Wentz.
that family.
Mm-hmm.
And our mother worked for Mr. Harris and kept books for
And
him.
then I don't know that there's any of the Huggins family, which is another old Fulshear family. I don't know that there are any heirs
There's
living.
Carolyn Ann,
Oh.
which would have been Mr. and Miss Huggins'
Granddaughter.
granddaughter. She lives in maybe Junction.
Oh, okay.
Were y'all familiar with the land over off of Bodark at all?
Some.
I'm told that there was a plantation on Walker Lane. Do y'all know anything about that?
I don't.
No.
The only thing I remember, if you're driving from Fulshear going to Boardart, there was some land on the right that a family named Avis, that the Avises owned this land, and like maybe 4th of July or whatever holidays, they allowed people from Fulshear to go there and have a picnic.
Right. It was called Patton Dam.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And why do you
There was a
remember that?
lake out there.
Around Fulshear Lake,
Yes.
there would be a picnic and fireworks every year.
Fulshear Lake? I don't
I
remember.
don't recall that.
But down Boardwalk, there was a place, like you said, the Avises, but it was called Patton Dam, and we used to go down there a lot.
And what was that? What was Patton Dam?
It was a lake there. I don't know why it was called Patton Dam.
Huh.
They may have dammed it up to make the lake.
Maybe so.
No, it's interesting. Okay, what scandals were back then that you can share with us today?
I don't know. It's not scandalous at all. But what I remember as a little girl, whenever had the forecast of a hurricane, we didn't call them hurricanes then. We called them storms. And if a storm was coming, everybody in the town went to the grocery store, to the big brick store, which was Briscoe, Harris, Huggins, Mason, Grady. We would all go there. And during one storm, a gentleman died. And I was a little girl, and to this day I can still see them covering him in white and moving him. And his name was Burford Wade. And he was buried up in the Fulshear Cemetery. And for, like I said, we'd go visit the cemetery because it was our pastime. And I remember seeing a holster laying on his grave for a long time.
Really?
Yes. And this isn't scandalous. This is...
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know why?
That was the Wade family.
And
he and his family lived where the present McCanns live now.
Okay. Next to the vineyard.
Hmm?
Where the vineyard is?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Burford Wade.
And they owned a beer joint, I think they called it at the time, out of town, between here and...
Oh, years ago before our time, I've read that there were lots of beer joints in
yes.
Fulshear. They weren't called beer joints, they were saloons.
Right.
Called saloons.
So do you know what made him die during the storm?
I think he had a heart attack.
Wow.
I remember.
That made an impression.
Just, I guess just seeing this dead person. We were all scared.
So what was symbolic of the holster? Why did they leave that on his grave? Do you know?
I think he was a kind of, I don't want to say roughneck, but
A little rowdy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Huh. That's interesting.
Did y'all know Sephora West?
Oh, yes.
Of course.
Very much, yes.
Didn't she teach?
She taught in East
East
Bernard.
Bernard, yeah.
Mm-hmm. She sure did. Mm-hmm.
Now, I think it would have been her uncle, Mr. Weeding. Si.
So, Weeding, that wasn't...
He was our bus driver.
Right.
He drove the school bus.
And there, they
Fulshear.
lived where Francis Smart Park is.
Hmm.
Right. Manicures and... Right.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm. That was Sethora's something.
Do you remember back in the early 2000s when the money was raised to build the gazebo? It's
No,
back
I
around
don't.
2001, 2002.
Mm-mm.
They took
Mhm.
up a collection.
Mm-mm.
So what do you remember about Miss West? What stands out in your mind when you think of her?
She was very much into history. She knew a lot of things about Fulshear. Yes. Very much so.
I think my last association with her was we were both active in the Fort Bend County Historical Museum at one time.
Are you still part of that now? Do you
No.
still work there?
Yeah.
Y'all lived in another house in Fulshear.
Where Deckers is. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Now that's really where I grew up. So,
Really?
yes.
So Deckers has been pretty much torn down, remodeled. They were going to
Our
remodel
house
and they
was-
ended up doing a lot more to it.
Our house was where the
Our
parking
house
lot
was
is.
right. Yes, where the beauty shop is. Our house was right. Our house was right next to that,
Okay.
and that's really where I grew up. So,
Okay.
And you have stories of watching other houses being built in that area.
no, not really.
No,
Mm-mm.
You were telling me stories of watching the kids next door or something other.
I don't recall.
Mm-mm. Because a lot of the houses were already there, you know.
So what did y'all do?
But
Like, when you woke
every
up in the morning, what'd you do?
Every
Work?
Saturday night, we all of us kids then got together the Bentleys, the Doziers, Ruiz. We had and Penny Meyer, Herc's aunt. Well, she lives back in Fulshear
She
now.
does.
Yes, Penny does. Yes. And we'd have a dance every Saturday night, you know, at someone's house. Just all of us kids would, you know. We'd go to some of the rice canals and go swimming, and that was our swimming pool. So,
Wow.
yeah. So,
What shocks you the most about Fulshear today?
oh, I guess just all the homes and the people that are out here, you know. Who would have ever thought? You know, we were out in the boondocks, you know, so.
The rapid growth.
Very much so, yes. I mean, we could just walk to everyone's house and we were all right here.
It seemed very close knit.
Yes.
It was.
Very close knit. I remember living in Fulshear as a child. The lightning bugs that are all gone.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Chase those lightning bugs, and well, we would use them as paint, which is pretty bad. Just like smush them along your arms, and yeah.
Oh, we used to put them in jars and
Editing that.
Yeah, lots of lightning bugs. Any
Yes.
other questions about
Did y'all go to the Methodist church? Is that where y'all went to church
that
every
was our
Sunday?
only church.
Mm-hmm.
We did.
So Sunday morning, Sunday night.
Sunday night we had a lady that had MYF,
Mm-hmm.
and so we go there. Sometimes we'd skip a little and go swimming, you know, out at rice canals. But
Weren't you married in the Methodist church?
I was married in the Methodist church in Fulshear.
Okay.
Yes.
And do they have Wednesday night service too? I know the Baptists do. I didn't know if the Methodists do.
No.
we didn't.
No.
So you went Sunday morning, Sunday evening.
The preacher lived in Brookshire. He would come from Brookshire here.
Do you remember who it was then?
I remember the Sutton because he had kids, and you know, so we ran around with the kids. Other than that, I don't remember.
Tell us about your wedding.
Oh my.
What year was it?
1954, July 1st, 1954. We were married in the Methodist church. I don't recall the minister. Were you an attendant? Mimi Dozier was an attendant, and Joyce.
And
my
Joyce,
older
that was all
sister
you
were
had.
my
Mhm.
attendants. And I wore a white lace dress, and my bridesmaids wore a pale blue lace dresses made exactly like my wedding dress. And my daddy's cousin, who was a florist, came from Houston, and she did the flowers, and they were tiny yellow roses.
Wow.
And the girls, I think they had a band of yellow roses in my bouquet. And then we went back to the house and had cake and punch.
Where'd you go on your honeymoon?
Bastrop State Park. I can't believe you asked me that. Bastrop State Park.
And did you work at that time? Like when you first
No.
got married? You
No.
didn't.
I know I had never worked. Paul was in the military, and so we were at Fort Hood, and I had never worked.
How long have you been in East Bernard? Like, did you leave from Fulshear and head out there? Or
Yes, my
married
husband was from Beasley, and we got married in East Bernard in a Catholic church, and have lived there. We'll be married 55 years in October, and so always lived there.
And Patsy, how many children do you have?
I have 4 children. I have Deborah, who's the oldest, Paul Jr., which everyone knows as Dub, and Suzanne and Karen. And they're all in this area now.
Good. And how many grandchildren do you have now?
I have 7 grandchildren, and I have 4 great-grandchildren. I have a new one. I have 3 great-grandsons and 1 great-granddaughter.
Okay. And Lois, you
I have
have
3 children
Mhm.
and 8 grandchildren, and they all live in East Bernard. So,
that's amazing.
right.
Very good.
Dan, can you think of anything else?
Patsy, how did you meet your husband?
In Brookshire at the drive-in.
The drive-in movie
No, the drive-in, you know, where you drive up to get a Coke.
to get a food.
There was truly a drive-in in Brookshire. And Mimi and I were there one maybe Sunday afternoon, and there was Paul with 2 or 3 other guys. So we started talking, and then I guess he called me or came by. I guess we had phone.
Where did he live at that time?
He lived at Pecan Acres Ranch. He was working at the ranch in Simonton.
And where's he from originally?
He's from the Wharton area.
Okay.
How far back does your grandparents go in Simonton, Fulshear area?
My father's parents, his mother died at a very early age, but his father lived in Simonton, and my father was from the Simonton area. In fact, I never knew my grandfather because he died when I was, probably before I was born.
Yeah.
But he would oversee convict labor, harvesting the potatoes in Simonton, and that's what he did. And my father grew up on what is now Pecan Acres Ranch, or used to be Pecan Acres Ranch, and he can remember and always cautioned us about the flood of 1913. And he said the water came up so fast that what they did was put the chickens and the livestock and whatever they had upstairs in their house. And I think they left in a boat.
So did he say how far the water came? Because I've heard this and I've read books about it flooding in between Fulshear and Simonton.
Oh, yes.
And the water getting up really high. So was that, it's a little ways from the river, so is that from Bessie's Creek that was causing that?
Probably, I would assume.
The Brazos, and I remember 1957, how high it got. It was between like Bertman's store and Roundup Road, you know, the Roundup through there. But that was from the Brazos.
And so go back through, like your dad was Warren, or I'm sorry, Walter Self.
Walter, yes.
And your mom was Edna Self.
Right.
And what were your grandparents' names?
Well, of course, Self was my father's name. My mother's maiden name was Wooster, Wooster, and her family was from Orchard.
Okay.
You mentioned the convict labor. And was that just during your father's time or grandfather's time, or was that during your time?
I don't recall any of that. So I'm sure it was during my father's time. You don't remember any of that?
No, not at all.
Was there a prison out here? Or they just would, or you don't remember it, but did you hear, did they bring the convicts out here
There is
to?
a barn or something in Simonton, because Mary Ruth Sr., Debbie, you help me here, lives there, and she says, I live in the convict barn.
Could be. I remember Doug finding those coins from the potato plantations that were related to the convict.
And he found those in Bessie's Creek.
Do you recall when Valley Lodge was developed?
Yes, I do. Very much so. And the flood of 1957,
57.
Paul got in a boat, and perhaps Deborah was with him. She was very young, and would ride a boat through Valley Lodge, what is now Valley Lodge. Yes.
When did they start building houses there? Do you remember?
I would say the 60s, late
Early-
60s.
You think that late? I thought maybe the early 60s.
Mm-hmm. When Valley Lodge was first developed, there weren't that many homes. It was developed as ranchettes, and people from Houston would build what we would call a barn-dominium today. A weekend place, had a bathroom, kitchen, and then stalls for their horses. So
But I
it was
remember our daddy always saying that, that's going to flood. Those people should not build there.
Wow.
Yeah,
He did.
he always said that.
Do y'all remember the old bank when it was open? The bank in Fulshear where City Hall is?
I don't know.
Mm-mm.
No.
How about Daily Store in Simonton?
I can remember growing up as a kid, my uncle lived at where Pecan Acres is now, and we would visit them, and we would walk from there to Simonton with maybe 10 cents, and we'd go to Burtman's store and to Daily Store, and we'd buy penny candy. And
Where were each of those? Like, what was where the hair salon is now? What was in that building?
that
That
was
was
the Daily
Daly's.
Store.
Okay.
It was a general mercantile store, and across the street where Burtman's is today, that was the same thing. Fresh meat, produce, canned goods, dry goods, I guess gasoline, kerosene, whatever you needed.
Mm-hmm.
Fabric by the yard.
And you said it was your uncle that lived out in Pecan Acres?
Yes, he did.
And what was his name?
Allen Self. He also lived, where's now Weston Lakes or Fallbrook?
Yes, he worked for Mr. Harris, and where Weston Lakes is, that was all Harris land, and Uncle Allen managed all that, with the pecan trees and the cotton, and
So they grew.
They had sharecroppers or what,
Uh-huh. And so they grew cotton where Weston Lakes is now.
Mm-hmm.
And cattle.
Cattle.
Mhm.
Sure did.
His house was right near where the dam is now.
Mm-hmm. That's where they lived. My cousin and I used to walk to Fulshear. We'd maybe meet one car.
Wow.
What was it like to travel back then? Were the roads asphalt like they are today?
No, I recall what is now 359 where Foster High School is now. When we went to Rosenberg and went to school, that was a gravel road.
How long did it take you to get to school when you rode?
Forever.
Like, do you remember what time you had to catch the bus or what time you got home in the afternoons?
I really don't. It was like probably 7 to 5 o'clock.
Yeah, it seems like a long trip, especially if you're going down a gravel road.
But the bus would also stop and pick up students that lived in Foster,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes that back road down where
We'd
the
turn
river
down
is.
Boardwalk Lane sometimes
Right.
and go back that way.
Winter Foster.
Mm-hmm. Winter
Right,
Foster.
Winter Foster.
Yes.
Wow. Hmm.
Anything y'all want to share that we haven't asked?
Y'all done a good job.
Was she a good sister, or was she mean to you?
No, she
No,
wasn't
she was
mean
spoiled.
to me.
She was a baby and she was
spoiled.
spoiled. No, we got along great.
No, yeah, we really did.
She took Debbie under her wing, and to this day, Debbie doesn't call her Lois. Debbie calls her Aunt Bobby, because Lois taught her to say Bobby.
Because I was dating a boy named Bobby, and I wanted her to learn to say Bobby, which she did. But I was Aunt Bobby.
Did you end up not marrying Bobby?
No.
So all my children call her Aunt Bobby.
Right.
That is. And we have to go back to, y'all did not plan to match today with your white
Not
pants.
whatsoever.
I hadn't talked to her all day.
No.
That is great.
No. Showed up and
I'm gonna have to try to smoke these sticks. What were they again?
It was grapevines.
Why don't you talk a little bit about Papa and what kind of man he was, and you know, a little bit about Papa, because he was a character.
Yes, he was. And he knew a lot about, he was not educated. He went to the maybe 7th grade or so, but he was very, very smart man. And,
Loved history.
Yes, he did. And
Would that have been y'all's grandfather?
no,
our
our
father.
Their
dad.
dad. Walter Self.
To this day, I can drive these back roads, and I thought, oh, if I could only ask Daddy. You know, he knew who owned every piece of land and what happened there and everything. So, and I grew up with Daddy, I guess, more than Patsy and Joyce. But
Yeah, you did.
yeah. So,
How far back does the Sabrsula family go?
Well, the Sabrsula family here in Symington is just as far back as from when Paul was here.
I mean,
But-
how did the Sabrsulas come to be in America that kind of far back?
Okay, I don't know the date, but Paul's mother came from the old country. Her name was Muniza, and she came over on a boat as an infant. And she came from
She's from
Pro-
Serbia.
what, Serbia?
Mhm.
Okay.
Well, it'd be
But there are-
today's Serbia, but she was Bosniak or Bosnia.
Yeah.
And then Grandpa, who she married, Grandpa Sabrsula, is from Moravia, and he came over as a young child. So it's really just first generation, my grandparents. It's the Self family, their parents that go way back here.
No, okay, so how far back does the Self family go? You know?
I'm sorry, I
don't
don't.
know.
I've never studied genealogy. I haven't.
But Papa's family's from Tennessee, right?
Yes.
Yes. And Daddy was born in 1901, so
Do y'all
I
have
don't
any
know.
family buried in the graveyard?
Mm-hmm.
In Fulshear? Oh, yes.
Our mom and dad, and we have 2 brothers that are buried there.
There's lots of history in the Fulshear Cemetery.
Oh, I've been in there. I know.
Yes.
I know.
I'm on the board at the cemetery. And
Are
so-
you?
Yes, we just, have y'all been and seen the new fence and
No.
all that? It's very nice now.
I was surprised when I went into the cemetery how it's very meandering. It's like they don't really make much use of the land like they do nowadays,
Right.
you know, but it's gorgeous. I mean, just.
And it really looks nice now. The wild hogs had gotten in there, and so we cleared it out and put a hog-proof fence and gates that are opened in the morning and closed in the evening. So,
Do you know what the oldest grave is in that
oh
cemetery?
gosh, I should. It's some of the Briscoes that go way back. They're kind of right close to the front.
Did y'all know Adolf Briscoe?
Adolf Briscoe.
No.
He was a governor of Texas.
Oh, Dolph Briscoe.
Y'all know
Dolph
him?
Briscoe.
Yes.
Yes, he was, yeah.
What was he like?
I don't know.
A Democrat.
Was he older than you?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes. But
What would you say to somebody that is thinking about moving to the area? What would you want them to know?
I don't know anymore. Really don't.
I don't either, but after what we've just been through with the floods, you know, I would want people to be cautious as to where they were building a home.
What about the history of Fulshear and Simonton? As a kid, was there any rivalry between Fulshear and Simonton, or was it you just kind of Fulshear-Simonton, you just were truly neighbors?
I think you were truly neighbors because there were no schools to have, you know,
No.
rivalry. There was an elementary school here, there was an elementary school in Symington, but it's not like Rosenberg and Richmond.
Right. And the school bus would pick up Simonton kids, and then they'd come pick us up. And, you know, we all rode the same school bus. So.
Right. Excuse me, that's my phone.
That's
My phone is ringing.
I can't think of anything else. Can y'all? I think we got it. Y'all did amazing.
We appreciate it. Thank
Well,
you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
We've learned a
y'all.
lot.
Thank y'all.
Y'all are. Y'all are adorable.
Yeah.
Buy 'em a beer.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure there's a lot more, and even if we had Mimi Dozier here, or I'm sure she could, you know, rattle a lot of things too.
Yeah, probably Joe Warren. Well, he was younger than us.
Well,
And
if y'all
Bill-
ever want to get together and do that, I think that would be a great idea. Just get a group of them together and just talk.
And also, I think you interviewed Billy Self, didn't you, Dan?
Yes.
And
Oh,
Billy's
right.
full of knowledge.
And who is Billy?
This is my cousin,
He's our cousin.
And so who's his dad?
Alan
Alan.
Self.
Okay.
He had Billy, Bo, Erlene, and Janet.
Okay, and so what were the scandals of today that you can tell us in the last 20 or 30 years? That you chuckled at when I asked y'all earlier.
Lord's no.
Oh, I don't know. It was just, everyone always said it was kind of like a little Peyton place, you know.
Okay, so be specific.
But, well, I was younger. So.
That seems you use that quite often, don't you? I was younger.
I was younger.
For
Don't
Alan.
remember a lot.
Okay, well, I need you to say something slower for me that I didn't understand. The name of the store that you call Briscoe's, but it was Briscoe.
Harris.
Uh-huh.
Remember, these are families that own the store.
Right.
It's Briscoe, Harris, Huggins, Mays.
Briscoe, Harris, Huggins, Mays. Those
And
were
then
the
later came Grady.
Okay.
four. Right.
The building that was across the street had Mays above it.
That's it. Right.
Yeah.
That's the store y'all were talking about.
Right.
And where was
Ah.
it located?
Where the
Over
Shell station is.
Yeah.
Right here?
Yeah.
Oh,
On
I
the corner.
figured it would be there.
Where the
It's
Shell
on the
station
corner.
is.
On the corner.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
So when did that? So that building then was built after 1910, after the fire of
Well, I think
1910.
it was 1911. I have some pictures in our store. And I think it was pictures say 1911 or 1913.
And
I
when
think
did
so.
they tear it down? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, I was married.
At the
Then-
time they started developing things like when the
Then
Shell
Dr.
station came in.
But Dr. Pollock had a dentist office there,
Right.
and they closed the store, but Mama still worked for Mr. Harris in one little part of the store, and that's where they bought, you know, pecans, and he bought cotton and, you know, things like that. But the big store was closed, but the building was still here.
Mm-hmm.
When y'all lived here, I remember seeing photographs of the store, and there was a lot of black people in town. Where did they live in town when y'all were living here? And what was the interaction?
Basically, they left about where they
where
do
they
today.
still live now.
And as far as the interaction, oh my gosh, they looked after us.
Oh yes.
I mean, it was 4th of July or Juneteenth, and we called it Juneteenth. Whatever holiday that were, the black people that worked for Daddy at the county,
Yeah.
they brought lemon pies, you know, they just food.
Yeah. There was no difference, you know.
So did y'all know Viola Randall?
Mhm, she lives
sure.
right here.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
I mean, growing up, I don't remember this, but Daddy would tell me the story that my parents weren't wealthy by any means, but they had this black woman that took care of me, and that Daddy would have to get up in the night because I'd wake up crying for Rosie, and he'd go get her. And I can remember she did our wash. We might call it laundry today. I mean, where she had a wash tub and, you know, tubs to rinse, and she would bring her grandchild. Remember Rosie Bauman?
I don't remember Rosie. I remember Elizabeth. And
Was Elizabeth her
Oh.
grandchild?
no, I don't know. Mm-mm.
So who was Elizabeth?
But you had, you know,
Elizabeth.
you didn't think
Her
of
last
them.
name was
you didn't-
Schaefer. That's all I remember.
And you didn't think of the black people as your
Mm-mm.
maids or anything
No.
like that. They just were part of your family.
They were good cooks, and
Do you remember any stories of Viola?
she
I
worked
don't.
for the Hellwegs. Viola worked for Hellwegs all of her life. I mean, you know,
And where did they live?
the Hellwegs. Is it this street?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Close down.
Yeah, real close to here. I have to go back and look, but just around this street.
And what did they do?
He was county commissioner for a
And a rice
long time
farmer.
and a rice farmer.
What did she do for him?
Nothing. She didn't work. Well, I mean, she didn't work. Right.
So Miss Randall didn't work for him? Thought you said Miss Randall did.
Oh, she worked for the Hellwegs. Oh, you mean what did Miss Randall do?
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry. I thought you meant what did Miss Hellweg do? No. Miss Randall kept house, and you know, they had a daughter, Suzanne, and she took care of her. And
Did you know Joe Crow?
oh yes,
course.
he's still living here.
He is. I go visit him every now and then.
Oh, do you? Oh yeah, he comes to the store to see me sometimes. Sandra, his daughter, brings him.
I've met Sandra while
Yes.
I was there.
Mm-hmm.
How do y'all? What was your relationship with him?
Just friends. He ran what we call the pumping plant.
That's where I
That-
grew up at the pumping plant.
Really?
You did.
Really?
Yeah, my sister was actually bit by a snake out there.
What was your maiden name?
Chambliss. I know I always shiver when I have to say my name, but Chambliss.
Okay.
My dad was from Orchard, so.
Okay. But we
Oh,
were just
meals
friends.
are
We'd go
spending.
fishing down there all the time,
Yeah.
and you know, Daddy.
In
used
fact, there was a short period of time that Mother and Daddy lived down there.
well, we lived in the west. They lived in the West Winter house when you turn to go to the pumping plant.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And what year was that? Do you remember?
Debbie was born. Debbie
oh, I
remembers
was
that.
married.
I was 7, 8, 9 years old, so 60s.
Yeah, I got
When's the
married
last
in
time y'all been down there?
61. Oh, I don't even remember.
About a year ago, I went down there, and now they actually have steps going down to the river.
Oh, really?
On the side of the hill. Yeah, you can get down to the water.
Really?
Hmm.
Oh, I remember Daddy would wait for me to get off the school bus, and he and I'd go down there fishing all
We
the
did a lot
time.
of fishing.
Right.
One other story I just remembered, the war, when Papa would was on top of the store looking for the airplanes. You might want to talk about that.
I don't remember any of that.
Well, I vaguely remembered, and I guess it was World War II. Fulshear had what they called a lookout post, and various members of the community took turns about from going up on top of the store, this Briscoe Huggins store, and would look out for planes. And I was too young to go, but I can remember Joyce going up there with him. And then I can remember things that were called blackouts, where if there was any inkling that something might happen, we blacked out the entire house, even to where if we had a radio on, we covered the radio with something. So it was total blackout.
Wow.
And that's about all I remember. And then I guess the rationings. I remember tires being rationed and, like I said, sugar.
Yeah.
So when I envision it, I envision like the country store, like what you see on Little House on the Prairie. Was it like that or not really?
Well, no, I wouldn't say so, because it was so general. I mean, seriously, they sold fabric by the bolt, or you could go buy a yard of fabric, and there was fresh meat.
And ice cream, remember, they'd dip it out of those big things.
And hardware.
Do you have any photographs of that?
I don't.
Our sister may, but